Deputy Donnchadh Ó Laoghaire.
Taoiseach, there is a daft report out today. For the 14th quarter in a row, the 14th, it shows that average rents have risen. The average rent in Cork is now €1,372. In Dublin, it's now over €2,000 a month. This rental crisis, and it is beyond question a crisis, is crushing workers and families. €2,000 a month equates to in excess of €24,000 a year, just to put a roof over your head, not to mind the cost of food, insurance or sending kids to school. It's the same story in Galway, Limerick, Waterford, anywhere across the state. Sky-high rents and no action. The figures don't lie, it is crippling people entirely. And while they are shocking, they are more than just figures. They are the mother with 2 kids facing homelessness because her landlord has just hiked up her rent. They are the young person desperately rifling through daft just to find anything remotely affordable within commuting distance of their work. They are the couple who have no chance of saving up for a deposit on their own home. And a whole generation is being locked out of ever having any option of having a permanent home. People have lost hope of that, and that is a fact. There are thousands of people as well who are paying rent that they, in all reality, cannot afford. Inevitably, other things suffer. Hard decisions are made on what bills to pay and what a family can afford to let kids participate in. People dread trying to shop for decent food on a pathetic budget. Renters in Cork and across the state have been badly let down by the Fine Gael-Fianna Fáil partnership government. They have done nothing to reduce the cost of rents or to protect tenants from further rent increases. It just goes on. And as has been noted, the reality is that this is pushing more and more families closer to homelessness. There's 5,000 households on the public housing waiting list in Cork City. Homeless figures in Cork reached 435 at the end of September. Rents in Cork reached an all-time high of 47% in Cork City, with renters having to spend 47% more to live in a 3-bed house than mortgage holders. The Fine Gael-Fianna Fáil housing policy is not working. It's failing Cork and it's failing everyone else. It is time for real solutions. And I am interested. For a long time we hear Fianna Fáil criticising us for a lack of solutions. For the first time, Fianna Fáil talking about a rent freeze, something that Sinn Féin has been talking about for a long time. So that is something real and something actionable that you can do, that this part of the House has been calling for a long time, and now your coalitions are calling for, your coalition partners are calling for. Taoiseach, will you now take the step that is clearly required to stop these runaway rents that is forcing people into poverty, forcing people into homelessness, and give people that break and put in place a rent freeze?
Thanks very much, Deputy. As the Deputy will be aware, we have introduced rent controls, and as a consequence of those rent controls, as the Deputy is aware, we have introduced rent controls, and as a consequence of those rent controls, the maximum rent increase is 4% in any given year. And what that means that for hundreds of thousands of people who would have seen rent increases of much greater than that, the rent increase has been somewhere between 0 and 4% a year for them. Consideration was given to a rent freeze, notwithstanding the constitutional issues that may make that impossible, even if it was possible. There's a real concern about the unintended consequences of a rent freeze. And what we may see happening in the event of a rent freeze is less supply. Ultimately, if you need to rent, you need to find somewhere to rent. And while a rent freeze might work for people who are renting already, because they wouldn't see their rent rise, it might cause less new supply. And that means people who need to rent for the first time, the young people you mentioned, people who have to leave the home they've been renting for some reason, people who lose the home that they owned, people coming in from other countries, they're the ones who could really suffer in the event of a rent freeze. And we've seen in other countries where they've introduced rent freezes that has happened. It's protected people who are renting already because they don't see an increase, but people who have to rent for the first time can run into real difficulties. And that's why we think that's a policy that could indeed be counterproductive. But again, to talk about what the solutions actually are, the main solution has to be supply. Ultimately, there has to be enough places for people to rent. How do we do that? Increase the supply of social housing for people who are on the housing list, getting them out of private rented accommodation, off HAP, off rent supplement and into social housing, 10,000 new social homes provided this year, more than any year this decade. We're ramping it up as quickly as we can, 11,000 next year, 12,000 the year after, 60,000 over the next 5 years. And, of course, increased provision of private homes, because people want to buy their own home. They also want to be able to rent out a home. And we see now from the numbers that came out yesterday a big increase in commencement notices, a big increase in planning permission, so a very strong pipeline coming beyond that. What we see, unfortunately, though, is some people, in particular local authorities, voting down proposals for new housing. And your party deputy, the truth hurts. Count Corla once again, the truth hurts, and they start shouting. But I will be heard. Sinn Féin is a party that only a few weeks ago tried to vote down a proposal for 800 new homes less than 4 miles from here, close to Dublin city centre. 900 homes, new homes for people to buy, social housing and places for people to rent, and they voted against it. So in here they bemoan the housing crisis and housing shortage. In the places where they turn up to vote, they vote against housing.
Look, before we go on, can I just appeal to you? I know where tensions are a bit higher because there are by-elections impending, but the same public are sitting at home watching this chamber, expecting it to behave in a respectful, constructive manner. So will you try and stop heckling the Taoiseach? Heckling won't bring us any closer to the real world. Deputy Ó Laoghaire, please.
The Taoiseach has made a lot of the fact that the rate of increase is slowing. And what does that say to people in reality? What you're telling people, Taoiseach, is that you're still drowning, just not drowning quite as quickly as you were. But it's going to keep getting worse. That's what you're telling people at this moment in time. You've closing the door long after the horse has bolted. You've offered nothing to deal with the crisis that's facing renters. Under your watch, not a single affordable home has been built to rent or buy under Rebuilding Ireland. The rent pressure zones are not working. This situation is unsustainable. It is a crisis. It is forcing people into penury, and it is locking young people out of having any chance of having a permanent home. Every action this government has taken on the housing crisis is a day late and a dollar short. This is your chance, and now it looks like there's a consensus. This is your chance to get ahead of this crisis in rental, finally, to get ahead of it and to bring in place the radical solution that is needed to the radical crisis, and that is a rent freeze and a rent relief for all renters.
Thanks very much. I think the Deputy in his opening question spoke about Cork, and I know that's the city he represents, and he may be interested to know that the latest figures tell us that in the year to June 2019, there were 2,095 commencement notices in County Cork. That's up 20% on the previous year, and 593 in the city, a 150% increase on the previous year. So we're seeing new housing being delivered. It took a long time for us to get to the position where we could get the construction sector going again and get social housing going again. That is now happening. Because of the financial crisis, because of the crash, we had a 7-year period in this country where almost no new homes were built. And as a result of that, we have a big deficit of housing in this country, and that's at the root of the problems we face. Finally, we're getting to the position where we're seeing real and sustained increases in supply. 10,000 social homes being provided this year, getting people off housing lists and into permanent tenancies. And a big increase in the supply of private housing as well. More places for people to buy, more places for people to rent. And as a result of that, we can now see house prices are now levelling off and falling in Dublin, as we see from the Daft report today, in the words of the author. And I'll repeat it again, in the words of the author, not my words. It looks as though Ireland's longest ever run of increasing rental prices may soon come to an end. And wouldn't that be a good thing?